this is okay. I would say it's one of those episodes that don't stand out to me. I still like it, but if I was binge watching 50-50, if I would stop and say, oh, I gotta see this episode again. It was good. A little strange, though, with the whole storyline, though, of Elaine dating a guy who has the same name as a bad guy, basically. A little strange there. I'm gonna be honest and say Jerry's girlfriend, even though her character was not supposed to like George, she still didn't really seem like Jerry's type. Like, she seemed like the type of person who would wear the pants in the relationship. If you know what I mean, of course. But, let's talk about the masseuse. So, the episode started off with Jerry in Elaine's office. They're chatting, and they start talking about how Jerry had not vomited since June 29th, 1980. Which, of course, that came up in an upcoming episode again, in which, unfortunately, that vomit streak came to an end. He remembers that because the previous day he had vomited was June 29th, 1972. And then Elaine starts saying how her boyfriend hadn't thrown up in like 8 years or whatnot. And of course, Jerry has to mention that his name is Joel Rifkin, the same name as like a serial killer in New York. And of course, Elaine's tired of hearing about that. He said he's a good guy. He's not a bad guy. Her coworkers walk by and say, "We saw your boyfriend. What's his name?" Joel. Joel who? Rifkin. But then everybody's like gasping. She's like, she's like flips out and says like, stop making fun of him. This and that. But Jerry mentions how he has a double date with George, and he mentions how George has a date with has got back together with Karen, who was originally in the Mango episode. She was a woman who said that she felt full after the risotto. In the episode again where George felt like he wasn't on his A game in bed, basically. And Jerry's taking his girlfriend Jody, who's a masseuse, but Jerry's getting frustrated because he's been on how many dates with her and she still won't give him a massage. She gives him sex, but he wants the massage. So he's trying to lure her into it. So on the double date, George is doing most of the talking, and Karen's laughing at pretty much everything George says, which seems a little bit like opposite of what originally before. Because before, yes, Karen was into George, but she seemed a little bit extra into him in this episode, even though the last time they were together, she broke up with George because George was accusing her of faking. But she's laughing. Jerry's so focused on trying to act like he needs a massage and trying to get Jody to massage him, but Jody just doesn't seem phased at all. Like, even whenever it was just Jody and Jerry and stuff, Jody just, I think it's the reason why this episode's not sad, because I wasn't a big fan of Jody. Like, Jody to me just seemed like first off, I felt like she could have been more so like a mother to Jerry rather than a girlfriend. Like, I don't know. She just seemed like a woman who was just like, I'm boss, and we're not, and nothing's gonna top that. Like, she seemed like the one who would easily, one of the few girlfriends Jerry had that I could think of that they wore the pants. She wore the pants in a way. I don't know. Like, just something about her bugged me. But George was telling the stories, and he's obviously getting this bad vibe. Earlier episode, Jerry mentions how George likes double dates because he feels like he can impress the girl he's with, showing that he can, entertain his best friend's date also. In an entertainment way, not, like a romantic way or whatnot, of course. They get up to leave, and then George and Karen are talking, and then Karen gives George like the same motion that George gave back in the Mangoes. They want to go back to the place and, or whatnot. Jerry goes back to his apartment with Jody, and Jerry's still trying to get her to do a massage, but she won't fall for it. And she then mentions how she didn't like George, which was very obvious. And then, again, with just very little, very little, feeling, it looked like, she starts kissing Jerry. And like I said, she was obviously, led to sex, but like I said, it just does, to me, it wasn't convinced. Like, I felt like she was just there because, she was just filling in a spot, just filling in a spot and just, acting like a girlfriend, rather than actually being a girlfriend. I don't know, again, I just wasn't the biggest fan of her. And then, of course, Elaine had a date, though, with Joel, and he starts just throwing these hints about him changing his name. And of course, but then there was also, the thing where, Joel had an extra ticket to the Giants game, in which, Kramer was the first one to claim that ticket. Well, then when they got to the game, and, Kramer didn't have any form of identification to get his ticket, because he came later when the game already started. So, Kramer knew, of course, of Elaine's boyfriend's name, the guy who owns the tickets. So obviously they had to call Joel to the ticket booth to be able to identify Kramer to let him have the tickets. Of course, it was announced with Joel Rifkin, please report, and then Joel stood up and everybody was staring at him and whatnot. So that led to him. I kind of cutting this story through real quick. It's just quick, but that led to him, obviously deciding he was going to change his name. So him and Elaine came up with 10 different names, but none of them, were good. Of course, one of them that Elaine suggested was OJ Rifkin, obviously after OJ Simpson. But obviously, it didn't work out well, and it looked like Elaine and Joel broke up. Getting back to, Jerry and George's story. Well, first off, Kramer didn't really have much of a story, really, in this one, as far as I can remember. But he did get a massage, and then Elaine, I think George also got a massage, even though it didn't make sense because Jody didn't like George, but of course they paid Jody. But Jerry was getting upset because everybody was getting a massage except for him. Meanwhile, when George got together with Jerry, they were talking. George is obsessing over the fact that he finds out that Jody didn't like him. And he's obsessing over this. He's like, everybody's got to like me and whatnot. Karen starts getting sick when talking about it. Jerry gets sick of George talking about it. There was a scene where Jody had her massage table, and George packs it up and offers to take her downstairs. But obviously Jody's not fazed at all whatsoever, and is even more annoyed with George. And then after a while, Karen gets sick of it, and she basically tells George, it's your choice. It's either me or her. And then George, heartlessly just goes, I can't do this. I just can't stand the fact knowing that someone doesn't like me. And then Karen's like, well, now I don't like you. And then George goes, that I'm used to. And so it made no difference. Meanwhile, Jerry's on another date with Jody, and he has this soothing music playing in his apartment, trying to get Jody to give him a massage. She starts to, but then she's like, no, I can't do this. And then Jerry's like a little kid yanking him back onto the massage bed, like, what? No, you gotta do this. No, you gotta do this. No, you gotta do this. And then basically she just breaks up with him. And then as she's about to leave, George walks in. He's like, Jerry, can you excuse us for a minute? We gotta talk. And it's like, George, it's not a big deal. And then, of course, George goes off saying how, this woman does not like me at all. It's just irresistible, and I'm starting to like her myself. And then Jody just has enough, and she just storms out. And then George is like, I better go follow her and talk to her. And Jerry's like, well, George, the only thing I would say is maybe don't be so hard about the massage. And then George goes after Jody, and that's how the episode ends. Not much really happened. Like I said, the story with Elaine and the boyfriend with the name of a bad guy, that was okay, but it was also, I get the goofiness, but I didn't really find it funny. And I think the biggest thing about this episode is, again, I just wasn't a fan of Jody. It didn't seem like she was a fitting girlfriend. She, even though, yes, she gave Jerry sex and whatnot, she, did that. She didn't seem like a romantic person. It felt like she was just there as a babysitter. That's what she felt like. She felt like a babysitter. I like how they did put George and Karen back together again for an episode, but again, it it seemed like she was like a little bit different also as well. It was a little strange, a little bit of a strange episode. I didn't hate it completely, but strange episode for sure. Also, the lady who plays Karen, she actually appears in the next episode, the cigar store Indian episode, as one of Elaine's friends, Joanne or Joanna, one of the two. That's really the only fun fact. And of course, also Newman is mentioned in this episode, but he does not appear, as of course he's supposed to be telling the story about how he can't go out for the time being because Jerry shaved his head bald. But that's a Masseuse. Okay episode. Like I said, there's some things I was like weird. I thought it was weird. We'll move on next to the cigar store Indian episode as well, which I definitely want to be careful with what I say for sure in the next episode, because I don't want to come across offensive or anything. But you know, we'll talk about that episode next. So guys, what were your thoughts on the Masseuse episode? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel, and follow me on Twitter at DemandAirboy93. Till then guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch y'all later. Have a great rest of your night, and peace out everybody.